Greetings, kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome to our World of Darkness, where today we will be discussing the Blue Bloods of Clan Ventrue. Make yourself nice and comfortable. Pour yourself a glass of something red. And let's discuss the Clan of Kings. In Vampire the Masquerade, the Clan Ventrue has always been set up on a pedestal of leadership. They are the face of the Camarilla. They are the ones with enough financial backing and power to cover masquerade slips and breaches. They've also been the target for countless jokes and revolts. The Ventrue are probably the best and worst thing that has ever happened to the Camarilla. Possibly vampiric society in general. That being said, most princes tend to be Ventrue. There are the odd Toreador prince, the odd Nosferatu prince. Any clan can be prince, but the majority of them tend to be Ventrue. And the reason behind that is they believe that they are destined by divine mandate to rule over kindred society, to rule the world, in their own opinion. Now, their ritualistic tendencies and their loyalty are second to none. Not even Clan Tremere can really hold their own on that one, as fractured as it is nowadays. The Prince of Chicago, Kevin Jackson, child of Loden, has issued a blood hunt for all non-Camarilla Ventrue in the state of Illinois, believing that the Ventrue blood should only be within the walls of the Ivory Tower. Ventrue are Camarilla and nothing else. That being said, he is denying the fact that the free Ventrue exist, Ventrue who have put their loyalties and their financial backing in with the Anarch community. They are some of the greatest barons that you're going to find. Then there's the anti-tribute. The Sabbat probably would not have survived as long as it has, or did, without the backing of the Ventrue anti-tribute, for even though they're not loyal to the Camarilla, they are just as savage and just as precise as the Ivory Tower's Ventrue. And with the new power vacuum concerning the Sabbat, given the refugee status of a good number of Lasombra to the Camarilla, and whatever might be going on with Clan Tzimisce, the Ventrue will step up. The Ventrue anti-tribute will take the reins of the Sabbat. The Ventrue anti-tribute will not let the Sword of Cain fall. That's just opinion. But now, one of the first thing that comes to mind when I think Ventrue is their feeding issue. And that's because I'm a storyteller, and the few people who have come up to me asking if they could play Ventrue have always had a hard time considering the feeding aspect of being a Ventrue. We get the boring. We get the non-inventive as storytellers. And I think as players, it's our job to make it so that playing a Ventrue is not the same as playing a Toreador. It's not the same as playing a Bruja who has a little bit more of a style of business casual. We need to take it unto ourselves what being a Ventrue truly means. Now, at least in my games that I've played in, when a Ventrue is sired, they can eat whatever it is that they are feeding from if their sire is helping them at first. It's that first bite of freedom. It's that first bite of I chose this as my victim that sticks with the Ventrue as being irreplaceable. Maybe that is the small amount of rebelliousness in their blood letting them know that this is all they have. And even that, it starts turning into a sick obsession. So, what is the Ventrue Bane exactly? How does it work? How does it function? What are the mechanics? Well, the Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition core book states that their Bane, the Ventrue, are in possession of a rarefied palate. When a Ventrue drinks blood from any mortal outside their preference, a profound exertion of will is required, or blood taken surges back up in scarlet vomit. Preferences range greatly, from Ventrue who can only feed from genuine brunettes, individuals of Swiss descent, or homosexuals, to others who can only feed from soldiers, mortals who suffer from PTSD or methamphetamine addicts. With a resolve plus awareness test, difficulty of 4 or more, your character can sense if a mortal possesses the blood they require. If you want your character to feed from anything but their preferred victim, you must spend a willpower point equal to the character's Bane severity. I like the way that's done up, especially with you being able to tell. In the older systems, I don't remember that being a thing. I don't remember a Ventrue being able to walk up and sense that the person they're stalking is food. I do remember having a mean storyteller who would choose our feeding issue for us and not tell us what it was. We'd have to stumble upon it ourselves. It's fun. However, if you've got a character who's been around for a few decades, I'm pretty sure he knows what it is. Not that I can say that I've never done that sort of thing myself. Now, I've played Ventrue, who my Ventrue anti-Tribute priest could only feed off invalids. If I could not find one, I would make one. I had another one also who was a veteran from World War II, and he found himself only being able to feed from veterans. So he opened almost like VFW houses all over the place. Places where veterans who had nowhere else to go could come and rest and be taken care of for their service. His humanity was rather high due to the fact that he was helping out so many people who were in well-deserved help, but he was also doing it for the fact that he needed to feed from them. Now, another thing is the disciplines of Clan Ventrue. They practice the disciplines of presence, just as Clan Toreador. They practice fortitude, which there was always an old saying in the Sabbat games that I played in that the Ventrue have fortitude because the La Sombra have potence. And dominate. Many clans practice dominate, but none would ever deny that dominate belongs to Clan Ventrue. And due to that purpose, we will be going over what the core book states dominate actually is and what it can do. So, the nicknames of Dominate are Snake Charming, Mesmerism, and Mentis Imperium. Dominate grants the vampire the ability to control the actions of others, manipulate their memories, and force living creatures into acts they would not perform of their own volition. At its most basic, Dominate enables a vampire to make the victim forget the feeding they just endured or enjoyed. At its most dangerous, it allows kindred to enslave entire crowds of kind. This is the beast at its most cruel and controlling. Dominate acts as a bludgeon to enforce the masquerade, creates submissive servants, and reinforce self-assuredness of the vampires. When using the discipline, kindred feel omnipotent, although the wisest of them know that this too may be shackles of the kind, slipped upon them by the blood. It's interesting that the thought of using this power that enslaves the mind could also be enslaving the user. You can become addicted with these powers to the point where you don't care or know if anybody is doing anything for you loyal. That if they're doing it because you're forcing them to, even subconsciously on your part. Many Dominate powers require eye contact with the victim. Once they establish contact, Dominate holds the gaze of the victim until the user conveys their command or commands, barring interference. Catching the eyes of someone actively attempting to avoid the vampire's gaze requires a contest of the user's resolve plus intimidation versus the target's wits plus awareness. It is, of course, impossible to reach the eyes of someone squeezing their eyes shut or wearing a blindfold. But that person should be easy prey to other tactics. Using Dominate in combat or other frantic situations is limited to people attacking or otherwise interacting with the user directly, as everyone else's attention is firmly focused on their own peril. Unless the user has supernatural means such as telepathy, which is Auspex 5, at their disposal, they must command the victim verbally. The victim must be able to hear the user and understand their language. Without terminal decree, Dominate 5, commands resulting in obvious death or serious injury fail automatically. Subjects roll to resist command, resulting in other social or physical harm, such as undressing in public. Vampires cannot use Dominate to extract information, as the victim becomes a mindless puppet while under the influence. For example, the compel command Speak results in babbling word salad, while someone mesmerized to tell what you know about the assassin responds in what you know about the assassin. Dominate cannot make a subject do something they could not do on command, such as sleep. Ultimately, the storyteller determines what the discipline can accomplish, but they should take care to Dominate remains one discipline of many rather than a catch-all solution to every problem. I would like to take a break right there because that has, at least in the usage that I've seen over the years, changed. I have seen so many people use Dominate to pluck information out of people's heads, to force them to say something that they wouldn't normally say, or even the most common use of Dominate, sleep. Humans can't just sleep on command. I know this. I'm an insomniac. It fucking sucks. I really wish somebody could come in, look into my eyes, and tell me to sleep and have it work. But I'm glad that they changed this. It makes it a little bit more realistic and also forces the user of Dominate to be a little bit more inventive than just giving them the one-word command that will take them out of commission for hours on end. Dominate cuts to the core of vampiric mastery and predation. Thus, vampires must resist attempts to dominate them. A vampire of lower, stronger generation can resist dominate attempts from higher generation vampires by spending a willpower point, negating the effect completely. That is also interesting. If you are smooth enough and are able to just work your dominate into a conversation, which is not an easy task, because staring directly into somebody's eyes and telling them to do what I tell you to do is a little bit more obvious than, say, the use of presence. In the old books, it used to state that you could never dominate a vampire stronger than yourself, that generation was a block. In this one, you can get away with it if you find the individual who does not have the willpower to resist. It's usable, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting in these nights. On a total failure on the roll of any dominate power, the vampire can no longer dominate that target for the rest of the story. Dominate threatens humanity, especially in the vampire has any principles involving personal freedom or forbidding violations of humane integrity. Using it may incur stains. It is a mental type of discipline. It is a masquerade threat low. Barring someone dominating an entire auditorium to jump off a cliff of Dover, it remains one of the more subtle vampiric powers. The blood resonance is phlegmatic. The blood of the submissive or the dominate, master and slave, captains of industry, power trippers, cult leaders, and followers. I enjoy the idea of the resonance in the game. I will admit that I personally, as a storyteller, have a hard time knowing when exactly I should include the use of resonance, but I do tend to try to fold it into the story. Now let's take a look at the abilities that Dominate has to offer. Level 1, Cloud Memory. By uttering the phrase, forget, the user can make the dominated victim forget the current moment, as well as the last few minutes, enough to mask a superficial feeding or a chance meeting. No new memories are formed, and if pressed, the victim realizes they have a few minutes missing. Cost is free. The dice pool is Charisma plus Dominate versus Wits plus Resolve. The system: no roll is required against an unprepared mortal victim. Clouding the memory of a resisting victim or another vampire requires a Charisma plus Dominate versus Wits plus Resolve roll. The duration is indefinite. Compel, also level 1. With eye contact, the vampire can issue the victim a single action command, no longer than a short sentence, to be obeyed to the ladder. To the ladder. Go to that ladder. It must be possible to complete the command in a single turn. The storyteller decides whether to interpret ambiguous commands in an unexpected or unfavorable way. Alternately, the command simply confuses the victim and fails. Cost is free. The dice pool is Charisma plus Dominate versus Intelligence plus Resolve. The system, no roll is required against an unprepared mortal victim, commanding a resisting victim, a victim the vampire has previously dominated in the same scene, or another vampire requires a contest of Charisma plus Dominate versus Intelligence plus Resolve. Commands that go against the victim's nature also require such a contest. Duration, no more than a single scene. That's useful, I think. Level 2, Mesmerize. The vampire can issue complex commands to a victim as long as they have the subject's gaze and relative quiet in which to issue instructions. The instructions must be carried out immediately to the victim's best ability and must not contain any conditional actions, such as, if you see Henry, give him this document, as this would require the victim to exercise cognition. Cost, 1 rouse check. Dice pool, Manipulation plus Dominate versus Intelligence plus Resolve. System, no roll is required against an unprepared mortal victim. Commanding a resisting victim or another vampire requires a contest of Manipulation plus Dominate versus Intelligence plus Resolve. Commands that go against the victim's nature also require such contest. Duration, until the command is carried out or the scene ends, whichever comes first. Now, this I considered not discussing, but Demontation is now a level 2 Dominate ability. Before we go into the details of Demontation, at first I was unhappy with this because I thought it messed with the idea of the deal that the Ventrue made to the Malkavians in order to let them join the Camarilla. No more Demontation. Until the grand trick happened. The great practical joke of the Malkavians, where all of a sudden most of them ended up having Demontation again. At first I was put off by this development because I thought it might contradict things, but in all truth, if the Ventrue had decided to help the Malkavians learn Mesmerize over Demontation, there's no reason why that this could not be a thing and still make sense for the story. So, where I do miss the Demontation discipline, having them switch from mesmerism to demontation instead of an entire discipline switching hands makes a lot more sense, in my opinion. Of course, I do go the extra mile to try to bridge the gap between the editions through storyline motive. Demontation is an amalgam discipline with Obfuscate 2. This subtle power requires nothing more than casual conversation, as the vampire's insidious influence hides between the lines and inflections employed. The victim finds themselves increasingly agitated, and their inner demons bubble to the surface, eventually drowning out all rhyme and reason. Cost is 1 rouse check per scene. Dice pool, Manipulation plus Dominate versus Composure plus Intelligence. After engaging in conversation with a victim, the user can activate this power. For the duration of the scene, the user may attack a single individual each turn in Manipulation plus Dominate versus Composure plus Intelligence, causing superficial damage to willpower. A mortal who becomes impaired by this power experiences a nervous breakdown or a psychotic break, the shape and nature of which depends on their personality. and perhaps their blood resonance. A vampire that becomes impaired with this power must immediately succumb to a compulsion, as chosen by the power's user. If the user wants to affect multiple victims, they need to make a separate rouse check for each one. The duration is 1 scene. Demontation is much more sinister now. I like the effects a lot more than just affecting the moods of individuals on a heightening scale or making them hear the howling voices of victims. It seems a lot more streamlined now, and a lot of the more complex disciplines did seem to be a little bit more of filler in the past. So I do like the way this is run. Level 3, the Forgetful Mind. The vampire can rewrite whole swaths of the victim's memories. As long as they can keep the victim's gaze in full, uninterrupted attention, the vampire verbally describes the victim's new memories, which the victim then accepts as their own. This power does not allow the user to investigate the victim's true memories. It more resembles blindly painting over the old canvas. Cost 1 rouse check. Dice pool, manipulation plus dominate versus intelligence plus resolve. System. The user rolls the contest of manipulation plus dominate versus intelligence plus resolve. Each point of margin allows the user to add or remove an additional memory. The victim recalls the edits. Vaguely, foggy, ideations. Foggy ideations that can fall apart under close questioning. A critical win creates a flawless imprint, as real as a true memory. Duration indefinite. Now, this next one has an example of a misprint in the book. They did not put a header over this discipline, unfortunately. But the next power is called Submerged Directive. It is also a level 3. When using Mesmerize, the vampire can now implant a post-hypnotic suggestion allowing the command to remain dormant until specific stimulus occurs. This trigger can be anything from a specific date to a person. When you meet Roland, tell him these words, to hearing a specific phrase. The submerged directive never expires, and people can conceivably walk around with an order buried in their mind for years. The user can only embed one suggestion per victim. Cost. No additional cost. Just mesmerism. System. As mesmerism, though the storyteller might want to make the roles in secret, there's no way of knowing if the submerged suggestion works until the conditions are met. Duration. Passive. If you've ever heard of the story of the government having sleeper cells, this is what that is. Sleeper agents. Being able to give them specific tasks to do in specific situations and have them not know until it's too late. MK Ultra comes to mind. 4. Rationalize. Level 4. The vampire's victim believes that anything they do under the influence of dominate was the result of their own free will, and they defend their action, however absurd. Long-term exposure to this power can lead to severe mental trauma in the victim. Cost. No additional cost. System. If pressed on the belief, the victim can make a wits plus awareness test, difficulty of 5. A win makes them question their own statement, and possibly their own sanity. Duration. Indefinitely. Level 5. Mass Manipulation. The vampire can now command entire gatherings of mortals, and in some cases, even groups of vampires. The vampire can use this power both to issue instruction and to manipulate others. Cost: 1 rouse check, in addition to the cost of the power amplified. System. The victim can amplify any of their other powers to affect a group of people, mortals or vampires, at once. All of the victims need to see the eyes of the user. The user makes any needed roll against stronger opponents in the group. Duration, as per the power amplified. Now, I believe there's only one more. Yes. Terminal Decree. No longer hampered by the self-preservation instincts of their victims, the vampire can now issue commands that directly lead to the harm or death of the victim. Mortals can be made to blow their own brains out, jump from rooftops, or swallow poison. Vampires can, with a bit of effort, be made to walk into fire or sunlight. Cost: no additional hunger cost, but the humanity cost is potentially severe. System. Terminal commands must now be resisted. See individual powers regarding roles involved, rather than failing automatically. Duration, passive. Terminal Decree, much like mass manipulation, there's no test for it, other than the standard tests used in the regular Dominate. Terminal Decree allows you to make the victims harm or kill themselves, be they mortal or vampire. Dominate's come a long way. I'm actually happy that they've removed the possession aspect of Dominate. Now, that being said, vampires, for the most part, do tend to have the mindsets of predators, fighting constantly with their own human sides, their own conscience. That being said, the Antediluvians' power does seem to come to the surface from time to time. So, if that's the case, and the vampire tends to lose themselves to what their clan truly is from time to time, we call that compulsions. We know that the Brujah have a sense of rebellion. They have a need to disobey orders given to them. The Tzimisce have a need to own things, to bring things into their own personal collections. And the Hecata have a sense of morbidity that infiltrates their higher reasoning, and they need to dig themselves into investigations concerning death without the use of their gifts. The Ventrue, on the other hand, have the problem that most Ventrue have when interacting with anyone else: their arrogance. The need to rule rears its head in the vampire. They stop at nothing to assume command of a situation. Someone must obey an order from the vampire. Any action not directly associated with leadership receives a 2 dice penalty. This compulsion lasts until an order has been obeyed, though the order must not be supernaturally enforced, such as through dominate. They need somebody to follow their direction willingly, even if it's not what they want to do. Probably especially if it's not what they want to do. Now, going over what the disciplines were for Clan Ventrue, I cannot help but mention my favorite typo in any of these books. At least I believe it was a typo. In the old Silver Laws of the Night book for LARP, for the old live-action role-play for Mind's Eye Theater, in the old book there was the list of the clans and their capabilities, and when they got to Ventrue, they also mentioned the Ventrue Anti-Tribute. Under Ventrue Anti-Tribute, it said that instead of presence, they practiced auspex, and I do believe that this was a complete mistake. They didn't mean to have that there, it just kind of happened. And if I'm wrong, if anybody can tell me if I'm wrong, please do, because it eats at me. But I prefer to believe that it's a typo. Now, in the more modern settings of V20, of the Vampire 20th Anniversary Edition, there's a bloodline listed called the Crusaders, and they are Ventrue Anti-Tribute who have become the Warriors of the Sabbat. And the reason why I bring this up is because their disciplines say Auspex, Fortitude, and Dominate, and the excuse is that they would not be seen interacting with mortals, so why? Why would they have presence? The Ventrue have experienced losses lately. The paramount member of their clan, their leadership, Hardestadt, has died by his Archon's own hands. The Ventrue who was most likely going to take his place, Jan Petersen, his child, also murdered in that same instance by the same Archon. Lucindy has now been elevated to Justicar for life. The very traditions of Clan Ventrue, the pyramid scheme of you can move up in position when the person who has a position passes on, has moved into the Camarilla's way of working. Lucindy stops any progress to be made for the Clan of Kings. I don't know how well that's going to be handled when the Ventrue realize that. Well, I guess that's none of our business. That's something the Camarilla is going to have to deal with, something Clan Ventrue is going to have to deal with. Now, I'm interested in your Ventrue. What Ventrue have you played? What have you accomplished with your Ventrue? I tend to be Ventrue oddities. I enjoy playing Ventrue Anti-Tribute. I enjoy playing Free Ventrue of the Anarch movement. I've played one Ventrue of the Camarilla, and he himself was a little strange, because instead of being some Wall Street rich Fortune 500 Vogue cover GQ Ventrue, he was a police officer who could not give up on his need for justice. He eventually made very good sheriff for his sire, who was the prince of the city. But I don't see him following in the footsteps of most Ventrue. With that being said, I don't know what else there is to say, except for the fact that the Ventrue are going to be dealing with some pretty interesting situations now that their longtime enemies, the La Sombra, have come to join them in the Ivory Tower. I can understand the desire to have your centuries-old enemy under your boot. But how long will the Lasombra stay subservient? How long will the Ventrue have them in their chokehold? How long will Lasombra accept the fact that they're not allowed to hold titles or embrace, or in the more demanding cities, practice oblivion upon pain of death? That is not for today. But I think it might be for next Thursday, where we'll discuss Clan Lasombra and where I think they're going. For right now, we need to think about all of those Ancilli who are now suddenly in power. All of those Ancilli who now have what they always wanted. Are they going to be able to handle the pressure of leadership? Are they going to be able to hold back their arrogance that their clan is known for? I believe time tempers the elder. Older Ventrue are more apt for leadership because of the time that they have. I guess it truly doesn't matter. But it is our world. For our world of darkness, I am Voivode Maquette. Please comment down below any stories you'd like to tell me about your Ventrue. Also like and share and all that jazz. And I will see you next time in another clan discussion. Have a good evening.